So I want to share with you some number of skills that might help you to communicate your Christian worldview. You ready? Now, this is a friend of mine named John Lewin. Most of my cases have been done with John. John is a very good friend. We've been working together for like 18 years. We still have cases. I have 2 I'd like to do with him right now, but I've just been tied up on other things. And John is just a bulldog of a guy. I mean, he is so tenacious. He is the best prosecutor, in my view, in the entire country. And I've learned some things from working with John in trials. Now, when he finally goes in front of the jury, this is what he says. Almost always, he begins his closing argument with these words. And I laugh because he said it so many times in front of me that I pretty much have it memorized. I'll put it on the screen for you. He says, when Detective Wallace brings me a case, he has the difficult task of releasing it to me for the trial. All the effort he spent investigating and preparing the case for filing, it's all complete now. Now he has to hand the case over to me for the jury trial. I know it's difficult for him. It's hard for him to trust me with his hard work. In fact, I bet he still thinks he could have presented the case better than I did. That's true. I do think that. But he thinks he could have investigated it better than I did. So it's kind of an equal thing, right? Now, what he'll typically say in the very next line is, as hard as it was for Detective Wallace to release this case and trust me with it, I now have to release it to you as the jury. And I'm feeling the exact same way that he did. All this work, I have to trust that you will now do the right thing. It's a really interesting process, communicating a claim to a jury. And people will ask me all the time, Jim, where is it that you win these cases? Now, I talked about this in a Q&A about a year and a half ago here. But I just want to remind, though, if you weren't in that Q&A, I want to remind you of where it is we win cases, because it'll help you better communicate the gospel. You know, is it in the opening statement? Our opening statements are long, sometimes 2.5, 3 hours. But that's not where we win cases. If we don't win it in the evidence show, that could take 6 weeks, 8 weeks. We don't even win it in the closing argument or in the rebuttal. And it doesn't really even get fleshed out in the jury deliberation, if I'm honest. You know where we win cases? We win cases at jury selection. Is that terrible or what? Doesn't that just sound terrible? But it's true. You win. If you don't pick the right people to put on your jury, you are not going to get to a verdict. And both sides know this. And in California, we are allowed to exclude a certain number of potential jurors. Not every juror who walks in the door gets called, gets placed on a panel. You already know that if you've been on jury duty, right? Because you didn't make it on a trial, maybe. So I want to start with the first principle of communicating that's important, and that is you have to pick your jury with a great amount of insight. I'm looking for 3 things in jurors. I don't need PhDs. As a matter of fact, if you have a PhD, I'm probably not going to put you on the jury. That's your first way to get off, right? I've got a PhD in philosophy. You're excused, okay? Right away, you're out. I don't want that guy. I'm looking for people who are passionate. I'm looking for people who are without a bias that would cause them to incline in one direction or the other unfairly. And lastly, I'm looking for people who are humble. I'm looking for people who don't think so much of themselves that they won't hear the testimony offered by expert witnesses. Does that make sense? And sometimes your pride will keep you from hearing the truth. You know people right now who won't hear the gospel truth because they got a pride issue. I'm looking for jurors who are in those 3 categories. I want them to be passionate, interested. I want them to not be biased, and I want them to be humble enough to hear me. Look, I start off, I've only got so many spots in the jury, right? I've got 12 maybe in the box, 4 alternates if it's a long trial. So about 16 people I'm going to actually select. I'm going to have a ton of people come in on the day of jury selection. I got to figure out which of these people actually makes it into the box. And you know how I decide that? Well, there's a spectrum. I have to consider the spectrum. In that room with all the potential jurors, there are 2 groups. There's a group that basically, I can divide it in half. Half of these are not in half. I'm not sure what the percentages is. It depends on the room. But some of these folks are going to be so pro-prosecution that they're really inclined to agree with the prosecutor. And then there's another group that is really pro-defense. And it's because maybe they had a good experience with law enforcement or a bad experience with law enforcement. Maybe they trust they've got a relative who's a prosecutor or a relative who's a defense attorney. For whatever reason, they are siding in one of these 2 camps. And then you can divide these 2 camps in half. So there are actually 4. And number 1, you've got people who are so pro-prosecution that I could almost do anything, and they will side with me and they will find him guilty. They are homers. They are just going to stay with us. No matter what we do, they will trust us and believe everything we say. I would love to have a jury with just those people in it, right? Then there are people who are pro-prosecution, but they're fair. If there's not enough evidence to make the case, they will not find him guilty. Then there are people who are pro-defense, but they're also fair. And if there is enough evidence to find him guilty, they'll find him guilty. And then there are people who are so pro-defense that I don't care how good the evidence is, how good the case is, they're going to hang my jury or they're going to try to find a way to acquit him because they never trusted the cops to begin with. Okay, you know what we're trying to do when we select juries? It's pretty simple, right? Because the defense does not want any number 1s, and the prosecution does not want any number 4s. We are trying to remove the edges. We want people in camps 2 and 3. They might be inclined to one direction or the other, but they're fair and unbiased, and they will put aside whatever they're thinking to do the right thing. That's what we're looking for. Something similar happens when you're getting ready to share the truth of the gospel with people. You have the entire world who are out there who could be listening to you, in your office, in your school, in your friendships, your groups. And there are people out there who are already believers and people out there who aren't. And these 2 groups can be divided into 2. So, number 1, these are people who are Christians, and they're so committed to Christianity, they don't even care if it's false. They don't even care if I could demonstrate it's false. I could get the body of Jesus and drag it around in front of them. They would say, I don't care. I like being a Christian. It works for us. We do all our family holidays together. I am not leaving. There are people in number 2 who are Christians, but they're starting to have doubts. They got some open questions. And there are people who are atheists that are really starting to have doubts about whether their naturalistic perspective can actually explain the world around them. And then there are people who are in group 4 who not only are atheists, they are anti-theists. We do college presentations, right? Frank Turek has been here with you also, and we'll do a college presentation. And these folks will be in the back row, live tweeting profanity at you. You won't even know until you get off the stage and you look at your Twitter feed. And you're thinking, really? Yeah, because they don't want there to be a God. This is the spectrum. And just like picking juries, I know whenever I'm talking about God or talking about Jesus in any group, only 3 of these 4 groups is paying attention. I call this the 3-quarter principle. Now, I think we have to be very careful about juries. So before you get upset that you haven't been able to convince your uncle so-and-so or your aunt or whatever it may be, think about it. Where are they in the spectrum of juries? My dad is a number 4, a very committed number 4. I was a number 4 for a lot of years. Now, I have a strategy for all 4 groups. Here's how it works. If you're a number 1, you might think, why do you even need to talk about the gospel with number 1s? Why do you even need to make a case for why Christianity is true with number 1s? They already get it. They'll even stop you. They'll say, Jim, you don't need to make that case for me. I'm already in. I believe this is true. I don't need it. Save it for somebody else. Really? I still offer the evidence for Christianity and talk about the gospel in front of number 1s for a couple of reasons. Number 1, just because you say you're a Christian does not mean you even know what the gospel is. So we need to share the gospel with people who think they know what the gospel is because they might be wrong. 2, you're number 1? Okay, great. Do you have kids? Are they anywhere between junior high and college? Then you got a house full of 2s. And they want to know if this is true. They've got questions. And by the way, they aren't going to read my stupid book. They're not going to read anyone's stupid book. They want to know from you, is this true? If God is the creator of everything, who created God? They want to know these simple questions. If God is so great, why did 58 people die in Las Vegas? They want to know. And they're not going to read my book. You, as a 1, had better be prepared to answer the questions of all of your 2s. So start paying attention. And of course, we want 3s. 3s are people who we think we can actually talk about the gospel and help them make a decision. Now, what do you do with 4s, though? That's the trick, right? 4s are basically a pain in the butt, okay? They are. Right? And you know this because if you've ever seen a 4 posting a blog or commenting on a blog, he is using profanity, right? I mean, they are obnoxious. And by the way, I never get upset about that. That's what 4s do. Duh. I'm already over it. When I see a 4s on my Twitter feed, I'm like, hey, I'm not like losing sleep over this. This is what 4s do. But what do we do with fours? Well, I got one in my own family, my dad. Here's what you do with fours. You ready? It's profound. Write this down. You pray and you model for fours. You ask God to do something only God can do. And you model Christ, even though it might take a long time. And if it's your dad you're working with, it might take 25 years of modeling Christ and praying for fours. And then if God grants your prayer and moves this person from 4 to 3, they will remember everything you ever told them. And they'll be in a position to hear the gospel. But you don't move people from 4 to 3. God moves people from 4 to 3. So we got to be praying for those folks. As a matter of fact, when we take students to Berkeley, we tell them before we go to Berkeley, you're going to encounter all kinds of people on the campus of Berkeley as we do some street evangelism, and you're going to encounter 1, 2, 3s, and 4s. And we explain to them what the differences are. And they're like, okay, we get it. So now when they show up to Berkeley, they're wearing shirts. I didn't make these, they made these. We'll pray for group 4.